Tell me what are the exact benefits of Asp .NET Core over Asp.NET WebForms or Asp.NET MVC? Asp.NET WebForms was available from the beginning of .NET Framework, that is from 2002 itself. Later, Microsoft releases Asp.NET MVC in 2009 and Asp.NET Core in 2016. So if you talk about Asp.NET WebForms, mainly it has the performance drawbacks. It offers slower performance due to server events and view state. Because Asp.NET WebForms itself tries to make the web as stateful instead of stateless. That means every page has to store its state, and that state will be stored in the form of view state, and that view state object has to be transferred from the client to server and server to client for each request. For simple web applications, it may be okay, but for medium to larger applications, it's the biggest drawback. Because the view state weight gets increased, and that heavy weight view state has to be transferred for each request between the client and server. So overall, it is the slower performance. And also in Asp.NET WebForms, for every request, server page lifecycle has to be executed on the server. That means there is a series of server events that executes for each request. It is too complex and heavyweight. So it is another reason of slower performance. And also there are other disadvantages such as unit testing is difficult. So with all these problems kept in mind, Asp.NET MVC was introduced in 2009. Asp.NET MVC uses model, view, and controller pattern. That means it offers clean separation of concerns, so that you can test your models, views, and controllers independently. So you can unit test your controllers, models, and views. But it has its own drawback. Because Asp.NET MVC is built on the top of some of the components that are already developed for Asp.NET WebForms earlier. For example, system.web.dll. So somewhere it offers slower performance partially and lack of support for cross-platform. That means it is quite difficult or impossible to host your Asp.NET MVC applications on other operating systems other than Windows. Because Asp.NET MVC, being a part of .NET Framework, or at least it is tightly coupled with some of the components of .NET Framework internally, it makes it problematic to host on other operating systems. It is not designed for that. So we have to improve the performance, and we have to enable the cloud friendliness, and it should be cross-platform. These are the design goals of Asp.NET Core. Asp.NET Core first version was released in 2016, and the recent version of Asp.NET Core is 6, means Asp.NET Core 6. And in future, I will make sure that I release lectures for newer updates of Asp.NET Core. For example, Asp.NET Core 7 or 8. Asp.NET WebForms and Asp.NET MVC mainly supports Windows only on the host. So it is quite difficult or impossible to use other operating systems on the server, particularly Linux. But Asp.NET Core was designed as cross-platform from the beginning, from the scratch. Because Asp.NET Core works based on .NET Core, it is also a cross-platform. Asp.NET WebForms is not cloud-friendly, because it was developed in the time where the cloud computing is not in the market. Asp.NET MVC, though it is the newer release, it is not 100% cloud friendly, because somewhere it depends on some of the components of .NET Framework which are only available for Windows. But ASP.NET Core has first-class support for clouds such as Microsoft Azure, so that you will be able to host your application on the Microsoft Azure without having any server infrastructure on your development center. ASP.NET WebForms is not open source from the beginning. ASP.NET MVC is open source and ASP.NET Core is also open source. But ASP.NET Core has more popularity than ASP.NET MVC in the open source community, because .NET Framework itself is not open source, but .NET Core is open source. Of course, both ASP.NET MVC and ASP.NET Core are free for production level applications. ASP.NET WebForms follow event-driven programming approach. For example, if the user clicks on a button, it offers click event on the server. But ASP.NET MVC and ASP.NET Core supports model view controller pattern. In addition to this, you can add dependency injection pattern optionally in ASP.NET MVC, but ASP.NET Core has built-in support for dependency injection. You will learn more about dependency injection later in the respective section. In addition to this, ASP.NET Core is highly unit testable and also a modular framework. ASP.NET WebForms is no longer an option for active development, and anytime soon Microsoft can drop the support for ASP.NET MVC in the near future. So that says ASP.NET Core is the future of web development with .NET. In the next section, let's get started with ASP.NET Core application development.